Get excited, Ute fans. We have the Ford Ranger Super Duty here, something that could actually be a game changer for the Australian four-wheel drive scene. We're getting our first drive today of this vehicle. We've got 4.5 ton GVMs, we've got 4.5 ton towing capacities, and a whole boatload of changes underneath the skin of this car to make it work. It's going to work for primary producers, it's going to work for fleet, it's going to work for mining, it's going to work for caravans and four-wheel drivers as well. The appeal of this car is super broad. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get into it.
Let's talk about all of those changes under the skin first. While the Ford Ranger Super Duty does carry over the same wheelbase of 3,270 mils and being around the same length overall, suspension changes under the skin makes this taller and wider, similar to a Ranger Raptor. But it's not done using Raptor parts. Instead, we've got bespoke heavy-duty front control arms here for more track width, as well as longer leaf springs in the rear. Front guards, which are specific to Super Duty by the way, are flared to suit this wider track, and they also include a fully sealed snorkel as standard. There's 18-inch steel wheels wrapped in 33-inch light truck all-terrain tyres, and you've got those 8-lug hubs here for more clamping force. The chassis of the Super Duty holds a similar overall layout, but it now has a lot more steel in it. Wall thickness for the box section has been increased, as well as around the K-frame and cross members. The same 3-litre turbo diesel V6 carries over here, but is now detuned to 154 kilowatts. Ford tells us this is for strict Euro 6 emissions requirements, which also brings AdBlue to the Ranger Super Duty. Torque holds steady at 600 Newton meters, and you've got a familiar 10-speed automatic transmission here. The transfer case has been to the gym, however. It's bigger and stronger here, while still using clutch packs for some part-time four-wheel drive functionality, but it's not selectable by the driver anymore. The front differential is borrowed from the Ford Bronco Raptor, and that is a big upgrade, but you've got one in the rear as well. That is a differential with a 9.75-inch ring gear that comes from the big Ford Transit van. Both of these diffs have lockers and can be engaged separately from one another, so yes, you can do front locker only four-wheel driving here. Pricing for the Ford Ranger Super Duty starts at $82,990 plus on-road costs. That's for the single cab four-wheel drive model, and don't forget, pricing for this is a cab chassis only. So you'll be spending a bit more money on a tray or canopy to suit your needs. For reference, the cheapest tray for a Super Duty from Ford is around $6,000. Extra cab pricing goes up to $86,490, while the double cab Super Duty costs $89,990 plus on roads. Cab chassis not your style maybe? Do you prefer a Ford Ranger Super Duty with a tub? Well, there is one coming, so just hang on to your hats for now.
It's the V6 turbo diesel 3-litre engine that you find under the bonnet of this Ranger Super Duty, but there are some changes here. This engine doesn't have as much power as the regular Ranger V6 because this has different emission standards to keep. So we've got AdBlue here, we've got less power, around 150 kilowatts, but we do have the same amount of torque, 600 Newton meters. So it feels pretty good from that point of view. If you're looking for a car that's the fastest, probably the Super Duty is not the go. Of course, the Raptor is still there. But in terms of the under bonnet setup here, you still have room for a second battery. Now we've got a second battery fitted here. There's a battery controller there. That is an optional extra that you can get fitted to this car, and then your starter battery is located over on the other side. Now I notice on this car here, in terms of packaging, it looks pretty good. The alternator is down fairly low, and it's also worth noting that this engine, well, it hasn't had the perfect run in terms of reliability in recent years, but Ford tells us that they have made a lot of running changes to this car as it's been on the market and as they've taken on feedback and learned more about it. So it's got a big job ahead of it, this thing, because this car can effectively be weighing 8 tons in total when you include the maximum vehicle load and maximum trailer load. So that's a huge amount. The cooling pack has changed here, so we've got more cooling, we've got more thermofans and that sort of thing happening. The same 10-speed automatic transmission, and it's also worth noting actually that we do have a heavy duty transfer case along with those big front and rear differentials. So just like the chassis, everything feels like it's been really beefed up into this Super Duty to get the job done. Really interesting, and like I said before, possibly a massive game changer for Australia. Now, one car that this Super Duty really wants to steal some customers from is, of course, the Land Cruiser 70 Series, a car that's been a real staple in terms of remote area work, farmers, mining, and all of that sort of thing, as well as recreational buyers. Now, one thing that's really going to stand this Super Duty apart is the interior because, well, it's not different really compared to a regular Ranger, and that is a good thing. Now, one thing I do like about this Super Duty is even though we've got the relatively basic interior set up here with cloth seats, manual adjustment, we don't have the heating and ventilation and that sort of thing, but we do have a few nice practical touches. So we get the cup holders here, we also get the second glove box. That is a nice thing to have. So you've got an interior that actually has the practical additions instead of just all the nice to have things. So that works well from my point of view. You've got nice rubber floor mats here, and in an interior that I think is fit for purpose, but also it's comfortable just like a normal Ranger. So when you compare it to the 79 series, this does really feel like a world ahead, even though we've got big payloads here and big towing capacities thanks to all of those changes in the chassis. Now, the Ranger Super Duty can be had as a single cab, extra cab, and also as a twin cab like we have here. Mostly they are available as a cab chassis as well, and then you've got your optional trays on top of that. You can go for the aftermarket with a whole bunch of really quality setups. I'm thinking about things like Norweld and Mitts alloy, they're all in there, but you also have a range of Ford trays like this one I have here. Now, one thing that's interesting to talk about is actually the range of driver assistance systems that you have built into this Ranger. Now, it's actually separate from the tray, which is a really good idea. So things like rear parking sensors, the 360-degree camera there, blind spot monitoring, all of that is included in this bar. So if you're changing your tray for whatever reason, you're making adjustments and modifications up here, it doesn't affect the operation down here. It's a pretty smart way to go. And I do also like these rear recovery points. Nice and sturdy, but also they're actually chamfered, so they don't have any sharp edges. That means you can use them with soft shackles straight off the bat. Really, really good attention to detail with this car, which means it will work well for people who are using it for work, but also recreationally. So in terms of what's going on underneath the skin of this Super Duty, there is a lot. And I kind of assumed that this would be borrowing a few things from the F-150 in the United States, borrowing a few things from the Raptor, and making it all come together and work. But that is not the case here. We've got a vehicle that has a completely different chassis. In fact, only 6% of the chassis in this Super Duty carries over from the regular Ranger. And I think that's around the tray mounts there somewhere. Everything is beefed up underneath the skin. We've got different suspension up front here. We've got a wider track, the same wheelbase, however. So yes, it is a little bit wider and a little bit taller, but overall dimensions are around about the same size as a normal Ranger. Just so happens all of those capacities have gone up. We've got bespoke bumpers here, we've got different flares. These are not actually off a Ranger Raptor like I assumed. These are specific to Ford Super Duty, and they're also the front control arms here underneath, all specific to this model as well. Leaf sprung suspension in the back here. That has slightly different geometry in terms of being a longer leaf pack, giving you more articulation off-road and good load carrying capacity as well. Now, I'm really keen to see what this thing is like to drive on road, because generally speaking, if you've got a massive payload, it's probably going to ride a bit rough, but let's jump behind the wheel and find out. Now, I have to say, I really didn't know what to expect when I got behind the wheel of this Ranger Super Duty, because you look at the figures, massive payload, big towing capacity, beefed up chassis, you start to think, well, this thing might not be very nice to drive on road. But surprisingly, it's similar really to a regular Ranger in many ways. I mean, this is a car that's definitely wider and taller, so it's a little bit more like a Raptor in terms of the seating position and that sort of thing, the way it feels from behind the wheel. But the steering and the ride is surprisingly quite good. I mean, this car does feel heavier, absolutely. We've got a lot of damping here, so it does feel firm, but it's not unforgiving and stiff and jiggly like you might expect. We've got full-time four-wheel drive here. Effectively, it's the same clutch-based system that other Rangers use. The transfer case is bigger and beefier now, but it means that the car will always shuffle a bit of drive to the front as it needs, so it feels nice and sure-footed on-road and off-road. And this engine is smooth, the 10-speed gearbox works well, and let's be honest, the steering is better than it probably has any right to be in terms of the way this car holds onto the road, the way it turns through a corner. There's just no dramas at all with this thing, which is quite amazing considering the amount of capability of payload and utility that you have in this car. Now this 3-litre V6 engine, it's a bit down on power, and you can feel those 30 odd kilowatts that have gone missing with this new setup. And that's happened because this is an EU6 tuned vehicle. So it's got AdBlue and it's got less power just to make it a bit of a cleaner thing. And you can feel it when you really give the engine a boot. It just feels a little bit more stagnant and slow to build those revs up and give you progress. It's not too bad. I think it's enough for the job. But you'll notice that it just feels a little bit more lethargic compared to other V6 diesels, and even the 2-litre 4-cylinder bi-turbo. That's almost on the way out, by the way, but it's a little bit slower compared to that as well. Now, we did some towing with the Ranger Super Duty. We had a forklift on the back of our vehicle, and we had a combined weight there of around 6.7, 6.8 kilos combined. So that's a number that is more than what most regular 4-wheel drive utes can do. This Ranger Super Duty has an 8-ton gross combination mass, so it's well within the limit. And the towing performance did feel quite good. You could feel the lack of power there, absolutely. It wasn't a particularly fast car in terms of acceleration, but it holds the speed when it gets up there. You've still got 600 Newton meters, which is good, but there's a lot of strength and stability through the chassis and through the suspension, and steering feels really well dialed as well. So from that point of view, this would be a really excellent tow vehicle, provided you weren't in a massive hurry to get to where you need to go. And why should you be? But I'm quite amazed by the fact that Ford has kept the driving experience overall so close to what you get in a regular Ford Ranger. There's a bit of DNA there, there's a bit of magic, there's a bit of attention to detail that Ford has seemed to get right with the Ranger for so many years. It's still here with this car as well. This is a vehicle that is absolutely squared up against something like a Toyota Land Cruiser 70 series. Single cab, double cab, a big ute with a big payload and a big focus on utility and capability. But this car feels very different. It feels more stable, it feels more planted and grounded. It hasn't got that narrow track and that tall wobbly feeling. And of course, ergonomically, this car is significantly better than a Land Cruiser as well. It's a modern cabin here with good seats, good ergonomics and good adjustments. So from that point of view, even though we've got increased payloads, we've got the big tires, we've got the diff locks, we've got the heavy duty chassis, we've got all those things, the car just drives really nice with this dialed element that I really wasn't expecting. That's probably the biggest surprise from this Super Duty overall. One thing that is less surprising about this Ranger Super Duty is the improvement in off-road capability. Now we've got a car that's taller, we've got more ground clearance, we've got light truck all-terrain tires here, so we've got more traction, front and rear diff locks. So all of those things add up to what's going to be obviously a better 4-wheel drive vehicle off-road. Now, if you've driven a Ford Ranger Raptor off-road, you'll probably miss that suppleness that you get from the Raptor. This is a different car here. It's got a bit more firmness to it. You'd probably want to air down the tires a little bit to get a bit of ride comfort back on rougher surfaces. But this does feel quite good. The different leaf suspension in the back, you've got a longer leaf pack there. It does feel relatively stable and supple, I have to say, for a 4-wheel drive vehicle. And on top of all those mechanical aids, we've actually got some cool electronic stuff as well. So the different drive modes here, you can choose the front diff lock on its own or the rear diff lock on its own as well, depending on if you want a little bit more of the car pulling itself up the hill. It does work better in some scenarios. And we've also got a form of off-road cruise control as well in this car, and it does work well. You can dial up and down the speed, which is indicated here on the dashboard of the Ranger Super Duty. You can go as low as 2 kilometers an hour, and it gives you good control both uphill and downhill. Works really well. So you've got great capability in terms of technical terrain there, but also this Super Duty, of course, it's got the big fuel tank, it's got the big payload as well. So if you wanted something that's going to go long range into deserts, into rough and remote areas, we've got the right tires as well, a much more durable all-terrain tire. This could be one of the best four-wheel drives for four-wheel drive touring straight out of the box when you consider all of those things, all of those upgrades you think about that make the vehicle fit for purpose. This kind of has it straight off the bat. Big payloads, lots of storage space, good traction, good tires, good suspension as well. So from that point of view, really, this Super Duty, it hits the nail on the head if you genuinely want a proper four-wheel drive ute. If you don't, and you're spending this kind of money, maybe look at a Raptor, because you've got a more potent petrol engine there and you've got much softer, smoother suspension, but you haven't got the big payloads and the big towing capacity. So the right tool for the right job, if you need the serious gear, this is absolutely the car for you. I don't really like using terms or cliches like game changer when talking about cars, but you have to sort of face facts with this Super Duty. It does change the game for four-wheel drive utes in Australia, and it does things that other vehicles simply cannot do, and it moves into a space that is occupied by nothing else. And it's really impressive to see the amount of development and engineering that has gone into this Ranger Super Duty under the skin, with the chassis, the suspension, and all of those important things to give it some genuine capability in terms of payload, towing, and off-road. It really kills it in those three important criteria. So yes, it's expensive. You're paying $80,000, over $90,000 by the time you put a tray or a canopy or something like that on the back of this vehicle. It's not cheap, but it doesn't really have a competitor. There's nothing out there that can tow 4.5 tons and go off-road like this. And at the same time, you've got a vehicle that is surprisingly very similar to a regular Ford Ranger in terms of the driving experience. Yes, it's heavier, it's a bit firmer and that sort of thing, but the driving experience is surprisingly quite good. So this car, for me, it knocks it out of the park, and it's going to be the perfect solution for a lot of people who want a four-wheel drive ute to do exactly four-wheel drive ute things. This is the ticket.